the discovery of the pattern. In the quiet halls of universities and research libraries across the world, historians have long noticed something strange about the rise and fall of great civilizations. It was not just random chaos or bad luck that brought down the mightiest empires in human history. There was a pattern, a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, that repeated itself over and over again through the centuries. When scholars began to map out the lifespans of major empires, from ancient Rome to the British Empire, they found something shocking. Almost every single great empire that has ever existed followed a similar timeline of growth, glory, and ultimate destruction. The pattern was so consistent that it could not be ignored. Most empires lasted between 400 and 600 years before they crumbled into dust, leaving behind only ruins and memories. This discovery changed how we understand power, politics, and the very nature of human civilization itself. The pattern was not just about time passing by. It was about specific stages that empires went through, almost like a human life cycle. Just as people are born, grow strong, age, and eventually die, empires follow the same path. The young empire is full of energy and ambition, driven by bold leaders who unite different groups of people under one vision. The mature empire becomes wealthy and powerful, spreading its influence across vast territories and creating art, science, and culture that amazes the world. But then something happens. The old empire becomes tired and weak, unable to defend itself against new threats or solve the problems that build up inside its borders. Finally, the empire collapses, sometimes quickly in war and violence, sometimes slowly through economic failure and social breakdown. This cycle has happened so many times throughout history that historians now call it the collapse formula. The birth of empire. Every empire begins with a moment of possibility. It might be a military conquest, a religious movement, or an economic revolution that brings people together under a new system of power. In ancient times, the Roman Empire started as a small city-state in Italy, but grew through discipline, military genius, and the ability to absorb other cultures into its growing system. The Romans did not just conquer their neighbors, they made them part of Rome itself, giving them roads, laws, and citizenship in exchange for loyalty. This early phase of empire building is marked by unity and shared purpose. Everyone believes they are part of something greater than themselves, something that will last forever. The leaders are often brilliant and ruthless, willing to do whatever it takes to expand their power and protect their people. The economy grows rapidly as new territories bring wealth, resources, and trade opportunities. Art and architecture flourish as the empire wants to show the world how great and advanced it has become. During this birth phase, empires often create innovations that change human history. The Roman Empire gave us concrete, aqueducts, and a legal system that still influences modern law. The Islamic caliphates preserved ancient knowledge and made breakthroughs in mathematics, medicine, and astronomy during their golden age. The Mongol Empire created the largest connected trade network the world had ever seen, linking Europe and Asia in ways that transformed both continents. These achievements happened because young empires have energy, resources, and motivation to push boundaries and try new things. But hidden within this success are the seeds of future problems. The empire becomes dependent on constant growth to maintain its wealth and power. It creates complex systems of government and military that require enormous resources to operate. It makes enemies who remember their defeats and wait for chances to strike back. Most importantly, the empire believes it is invincible, that its success will continue forever without serious challenge. The Golden Age. After generations of growth and conquest, empires reach their peak. This is the Golden Age that people remember in history books and movies. The Roman Empire at its height stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Mesopotamia, creating a zone of peace and prosperity called the Pax Romana. The British Empire covered a quarter of the world's land and ruled over 400 million people, spreading the English language and creating a global trading system that made Britain incredibly wealthy. During these golden ages, empires produced their greatest art, literature, philosophy, and scientific discoveries. They build monuments that last for thousands of years, structures so impressive that future generations can barely believe they were created by human hands. The Colosseum in Rome, the Taj Mahal in India, the Great Wall of China, and the pyramids of Egypt all come from empires at their peak, trying to prove their greatness to the world and to themselves. But the Golden Age contains a dangerous illusion. Everything seems perfect on the surface, but underneath, the empire is already beginning to weaken. The military victories that once came easily now require more soldiers, more money, and more effort to achieve. The conquered territories that once brought wealth now cost more to defend and govern than they produce. The unity that held different peoples together starts to crack as regional differences, religious conflicts, and economic inequalities create tension and resentment. The ruling class becomes disconnected from ordinary people, living in luxury while ignoring the struggles of farmers, workers, and soldiers who actually keep the empire running. Corruption spreads through the government as officials use their positions to enrich themselves rather than serve the public good. The empire becomes less creative and more focused on preserving the old ways, even when those ways no longer work. Education declines as schools close or stop teaching useful skills. Infrastructure crumbles as roads, bridges, and aqueducts fall into disrepair because there is no money or organization to maintain them. The empire that once pushed the boundaries of human achievement now just struggles to keep basic services running. The internal fracture. As the empire weakens, the bonds that held it together begin to break. Regional differences that were once managed become sources of serious conflict. Different parts of the empire start to see themselves as separate peoples with different interests rather than members of one united civilization. Religious divisions become political movements as people use faith to express their frustration with the ruling system. In the late Roman Empire, Christianity grew partly because it offered hope and community to people who felt abandoned by the traditional pagan state. In the Ottoman Empire, nationalism emerged among Greeks, Serbs, and Arabs who wanted independence from Turkish rule. These internal fractures are often more dangerous than external enemies because they destroy the empire from within, turning citizens into rebels and making cooperation impossible. The ruling class splits into factions that fight each other for power and resources. Political stability disappears as leaders are assassinated, overthrown, or forced to share power with rivals. The military, which once was the proud defender of the empire, becomes a problem itself. Soldiers who are not paid regularly turn to looting and banditry. Generals use their armies to make themselves emperors or independent warlords. The government loses its monopoly on violence, and soon different groups are fighting each other in civil wars that devastate the countryside and terrify the population. Trust breaks down at every level of society. People stop believing in the government, the law, or even their neighbors. Everyone looks out only for themselves and their immediate family, and the idea of a common good or shared future disappears. This social collapse is perhaps the most painful part of imperial decline because it turns people against each other and destroys the relationships that make civilization possible. The final fall. The end of an empire rarely happens in one dramatic moment. Instead, it is usually a long, painful process that stretches over decades or even centuries. The Western Roman Empire did not fall in a single battle, but slowly disintegrated over more than a century as Germanic tribes carved out kingdoms from its territory. The Spanish Empire declined over 300 years, losing colonies bit by bit until only a shadow of its former glory remained. The final fall often comes when several crises happen at the same time. An economic collapse, a military defeat, a natural disaster, and a political crisis combine to overwhelm whatever strength the empire has left. At this point, the central government simply stops functioning. Tax collection ends, the army dissolves, and regional leaders declare independence or are conquered by foreign powers.
What surprises many people about imperial collapse is how quickly the very idea of the empire can disappear. Within a generation or two, people who once proudly called themselves Romans or Byzantines or Ottomans now identify primarily with their local region, religion, or ethnic group. The languages, laws, and customs that the empire spread across vast territories begin to fragment into local variations or disappear entirely. The monuments and buildings that seemed eternal fall into ruin as no one has the resources or knowledge to maintain them. Trade networks collapse, cities shrink or are abandoned, and technology and literacy decline as the complex systems that supported them vanish. This period after imperial collapse is often called a dark age, not because people are less intelligent or moral, but because the lights of organized civilization have gone out and humanity must slowly rebuild from much simpler beginnings. The lessons ignored. The most tragic aspect of the collapse formula is that it keeps repeating because new empires refuse to learn from old ones. Every rising power believes it is different, that it has solved the problems that destroyed previous civilizations. The Romans thought their system of law and military discipline made them superior to all previous empires. The Mongols believed their superior cavalry tactics and ruthless efficiency made them unstoppable. The British convinced themselves that their technology and racial superiority meant their empire would last forever. But each of these mighty powers eventually followed the same pattern of growth, glory, and collapse. The reasons are both simple and complex. Simple because the basic challenges of governing large, diverse populations over vast distances never really change. Complex because the specific ways these challenges manifest are different for each empire in each historical period. Modern historians and political scientists have tried to identify the key factors that cause empires to collapse. Some point to overexpansion, the tendency of empires to conquer more territory than they can effectively govern or defend. Others focus on economic problems, particularly the difficulty of maintaining growth and prosperity once the easy conquests and initial advantages are exhausted. Others emphasize internal decay, the corruption and dysfunction that gradually hollows out institutions and makes effective government impossible. Environmental factors also play a role, as climate change, disease, and resource depletion can undermine the economic base that supports imperial power. The truth is that all these factors work together, creating a complex web of causes that reinforce each other until the whole system breaks down. No single solution can prevent imperial collapse because the problem is not just one thing, but rather the accumulated weight of many interconnected challenges. The modern question. As we look at the world today, many people wonder if the collapse formula still applies. The United States has been the dominant global power for about 80 years, and while there is not nearly 500 years, some observers see troubling parallels with past empires. Economic inequality is growing, infrastructure is aging, political polarization is increasing, and military interventions in distant lands are becoming more costly and less successful. Other powerful nations like China are rising and challenging American dominance, much as new powers have always risen to challenge established empires throughout history. Does this mean the United States or other modern powers are doomed to follow the same pattern of decline and collapse that has claimed every previous empire? The answer is not simple because the modern world is different in important ways from the ancient or medieval world. Technology, particularly information technology and weapons of mass destruction, has changed the nature of power and conflict in ways that have no historical precedent. Global economic integration means that the collapse of one major power would affect everyone, creating incentives for cooperation that did not exist in earlier times. Democratic institutions and human rights, though imperfect and unevenly applied, provide mechanisms for peaceful change and reform that autocratic empires lacked. On the other hand, modern empires face unique challenges that ancient ones never dealt with. Climate change threatens to disrupt agriculture and create massive refugee crises. Nuclear weapons make great power conflict potentially suicidal for everyone involved. The speed of communication and travel means that problems can spread globally almost instantly. Whether these modern differences will allow us to escape the collapse formula or simply create new variations on the ancient pattern remains to be seen. The eternal cycle. The story of empires is ultimately a human story, a tale of ambition, achievement, hubris, and failure that repeats itself across cultures and centuries. The collapse formula reveals something profound about human nature and human societies. We are capable of building extraordinary things, of creating systems of government, economy, and culture that bring together millions of people and push the boundaries of what seems possible. But we are also prone to overconfidence, to believing our success is permanent and our power is unlimited. We struggle to maintain the unity, discipline, and innovation that created our achievements once we have become comfortable and established. We resist necessary changes until crisis forces them upon us, often too late to prevent disaster. Every empire that has ever existed has followed this pattern, rising from humble beginnings to incredible heights before declining and ultimately collapsing into fragments that become the seeds of new civilizations. The 500-year pattern is not a rigid law, but rather a general observation about the lifespan of complex human organizations operating at the scale of empires. Some last longer, some shorter, but all eventually end. Understanding this pattern does not doom us to repeat it mindlessly, but ignoring it guarantees that we will. The great empires of the past left behind lessons written in their ruins, their histories, and their ultimate failure to sustain themselves. They teach us that success creates its own challenges, that power without wisdom leads to disaster, and that nothing human beings build can last forever without constant effort, adaptation, and renewal. The question facing our modern world is whether we have finally learned these lessons or whether we are simply the last chapter in the story that has been told countless times before, a story that always ends with collapse and rebirth, over and over through the endless march of centuries. The answer will be written not in academic papers or political speeches, but in the choices we make today about how we organize our societies, distribute our resources, resolve our conflicts, and prepare for the challenges that future generations will inevitably face.